Imagine the scene. I'm there driving along in my truck thinking to myself, yo, this is some straight up cloak and dagger bullshit. I have absolutely no interest in this whatsoever. All I'm trying to do is make my deliveries and make my money. This is some bullshit. Now, when I'm done for the day, I pull back up to the warehouse, get out, head inside, and I'm debating in my mind if I should talk to my boss about this at all. But I'm kind of pissed off because I'm feeling like, listen, bro, you got me out here hanging. Like, you could have told me there was some weird, crazy shit going on. So I confront him and I say, hey, boss, listen, I talked to Chris, who used to work here, and I'm confused because I'm trying to figure out why you didn't take some time to explain to me that there's some X-Files conspiracy going on with this route. That's when he finally pulls me into his office, closes the door, and says, look, drive your fucking route and shut up. I don't need them people coming back in here messing with us, bro. All you need to do is drive your route. If there's a problem at the Mosley house, go in the daytime and you will be fine. Don't go over to that house at night and you shouldn't have any issues. But hold on, for you listening to the story, I need you to understand something. You see, I'm standing there feeling played because he knew this shit from the time I was hired. He knew all this shit from the time he gave me Chris's route. So that wasn't gonna work for me, man. Dude, you sent me into harm's way. Those were the exact words that came out of my mouth. Bro, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you, but you sent me into harm's way with no warning. I don't even feel like I can trust you. I don't know if I even want to keep this job at this point in time. Understand, the words that came out of my mouth wasn't so much about expressing myself or just getting it off my chest. I was dead serious. And he could tell, like I was angry, wanted to do something to him. That's when he looks at me, he says, you know what, so you talked to Chris, right? And I'm like, yeah, I talked to Chris. And he says, next time you talk to Chris, ask him why he didn't do what he was told to do. He says, no, you see, Chris watched too many sci-fi movies. He wanted to be a fucking hero, and he caused us all kind of problems at this warehouse. My boss puts it all in perspective for me. He says, you and I are a hell of a lot alike, and you need to listen to me. You see, I want to pay my bills, and you want to pay your bills. You took this job because of the raise, and that's the only reason why you took it. Be honest with yourself. Same reason why I took the managerial job was because of the raise. And what happened to Chris? Chris brought it upon himself. As long as you understand that, you will be fine. Listen, now that I understood exactly what the hell was going down, I wasn't trying to be in the middle of none of that crap. So I continued working my route, making Mr. Mosley's house my first stop, and then working my way back all the way to the warehouse. A month passes with absolutely no issues whatsoever. Then I'm driving up the road, headed to Mr. Mosley's house, and I notice these two unmarked vans down at the very end of the road where you gotta turn around and it makes a dead end. I get out, open the gate, drive up in the driveway, and Mr. Mosley is outside boarding up broken windows. And I'm like, Mr. M, what the hell is going on? But he quickly turns his head in my direction and begins waving, telling me, hey, everything's okay, just leave fast. I'm walking up to his porch with his package, trying to talk to him, and this guy comes walking around the side of the house. 6'7", slender, bald-headed, cargo pants on, black t-shirt, side arm on his right leg. This guy not only looks like he's the part of some type of military organization, but he looks like a badass motherfucker who's a part of some type of military organization. I'm telling you, it was the way that this man walked that let you know immediately, nope, I'm not fucking with him. Because he walks around that corner, comes all the way up to the steps of the porch where I'm at, and he says, have you made your delivery yet? Not only was it the way he walked, but it was his tone of voice. Everything about this dude just oozed. I will fuck you up in a heartbeat. I don't know why I did this, but you know how it is when you know somebody's trying to punk you and you can't really do anything about it, but you want them to know that you kind of not afraid of them. So I'm slowly putting the package on the ground, looking up at him, and he says, drop the package before I fuck you up and leave. Now imagine the scene. I done dropped those two packages right there on the third step. I'm backing away from him, and I'm like, yo, Mr. M, you okay? You need anything? Is everything all right? And he reluctantly looks back and tells me he's fine. So I leave, finish my route. Another month passes, and this man has not had a package ordered whatsoever. And understand, Mr. Moses was the kind of guy who had 3-4 deliveries per week. But all of a sudden, nothing. so much so that I have to shift my route back to being a normal route. And it kind of gets to the point to where I completely forget about Mr. Mosley. Then one day I pull up to the warehouse, I'm checking the logs, and sure enough, I got a delivery from him. I'm actually excited because I kind of want to know what the hell happened when I left. So I head on over to the house, and when I get there, the fence is no longer camouflaged and disguised. There's an actual mailbox right there off the road, and the fence itself is open. Now I'm driving up the driveway, the house is painted blue, the crosses are gone. I park the van, take the package out, and as I'm walking up to the steps, I realize, wait, this is Mr. Moses' address, but this package is not addressed to him. So I decide to knock on the door. Amazon, this lady comes to the door. When I ask her about Mr. Mosley, she says that the previous renter died and that her and her daughter had just moved in and they were excited about renting this house. Listen, I'm standing there looking at this lady saying to myself, what the fuck do you mean Mr. Mosley died? Listen, I asked her how Mr. Mosley died, and she explains to me that she didn't know. She just saw the house for rent and decided to rent it. And when she came and did the walkthrough, the gentleman who showed her the house told her that the previous renter recently died. Now this is where it gets scary for me. Now this right here is where it gets scary for me. I leave. I'm driving up the road, headed back to Highway 53, and two black vans block the road, and the same dude who I saw on the porch gets out, walks up to the driver's side door, and says, Mr. Johnson, you know what happens to curious cats, right? They start to lose their 9 lives. I throw my hands up in there. I say, listen, bro, I don't know what's going on, but whatever y'all doing, y'all do. I'm just trying to make my money. Understand, this man is staring at me with death in his eyes. And he says, I'm glad you and I have an understanding. Be careful, Mr. Johnson. Then they allow me to leave. Another 2 months pass and I don't have another delivery for that address. Then when one comes and I go to the house, there's another person living there. And I ask about the previous renter and they say that they moved and left all of their furniture in the house. When I get back to the warehouse, there's this fine ass white girl, I mean yoga fine, has access to the entire database. She knows where every package has come from and where every package is going. Now get this, I buy her lunch and ask her for a favor. I wanted to know exactly how many different people ordered packages to that particular address. She agrees to look it up for me while we sit there and have lunch. It turns out that every 3 to 5 months, it looked like someone new moved into that house. Now, straight up, I'm not telling you that I know what the fuck is going on, but I'm just telling you what I saw. I tried to call Chris back and just hold a conversation with him about the whole situation again, but it kept going to voicemail. So here's what I think, and it's only based on what I've seen. Those people are doing some kind of training or experimentation right there on that property. Understand, I still drive that exact same route. I still go to that house. And in the past 9 months, there have been 4 new residents that have lived there. Listen, I don't know what type of training it is or the purpose of it or who's behind it. But all I can tell you is what I saw and what I think is going on. You decide the rest for yourself.
This encounter happened to me in 2016. And I'll admit to you, at that point in time, I found myself in a strange place. I had recently lost my job. And if it wasn't for the substantial amount of savings that I had, man, I really would have been screwed. But as time passed on and my savings started to dwindle from paying rent and bills, I decided the best thing for me to do was to live out of my van. So I decided I was going to have the most epic road trip. Take 90 days, travel around, enjoy the world, and then try and find another job. Now pause right here. Let me say this to you. I started playing poker when I was 12 years old. My dad taught me how to play poker at the kitchen table. I played with him and his friends. When I tell you him and his friends were poker sharks, I'm talking about the kind of guys that played in poker tournaments and won. And so while I was traveling on the road, and when I got low on money, I would stop by a local casino and wait for an evolution of people to come to the table that were suckers. Now, if you don't know this about poker, there's always somebody who's at a poker table who's too aggressive, or there's somebody who's too afraid. And if you know how to pinpoint their tendencies, you can walk into a casino with $150 and walk out with $1,000 if you know what you're doing. Now, the circumstances that led up to my Dogman encounter weren't directly correlated to the fact that I played poker. It was more correlated to the fact that I was low on money and I was heading to play some poker. I find myself on the road, I-20, headed from Marshall, Texas to Shreveport, Louisiana, when I get a flat tire. It's 2:30 a.m. and I'm not sure if you're familiar with I-20, but people speed on I-20 and it's pitch black out there. I'm trying to change this tire while my vehicle is on an incline on one of those steep Texas hills. When I tell you this was a hairy situation I found myself in, this was a rough one because I wanted to make sure that my vehicle didn't roll backwards. So I went into the woods, found rocks, came out, put rocks behind the front tires, and I'm sitting there working to jack this van up into the air and put the spare tire on when a pickup truck pulls up behind me. Now, 2 o'clock in the morning, the pickup truck pulls up on you on the side of the road, their bright lights on, and you got to be prepared for anything. So now I'm standing there with the tire iron in my hand as this young man gets out of his vehicle and says, "Hey, sir, how can I help you?" And let me say this. This gentleman was the most pleasant person I have ever met in my life. He walks over to me. He says, "Hey, I saw you on the side of the road. I figured you needed some help. Do you mind if I help you get your tire changed and make sure you get back on the road safely?" Listen, there are times when being a poker player and being able to read people is an advantage. And this was one of those times. This kid didn't give off any bad vibes whatsoever. In fact, I felt like I was safe just because he was around. And so we get to changing the tire and he starts talking to me and he says, "Where are you going?" And eventually I start telling him a little bit about my story. Telling him I'm headed to a casino because I need to play some poker, because I need to make some money. And I've been traveling around in my van. He starts to ask me where I've been. Just as we've got the spare tire on and I'm putting the other tire in the back of the van, he says, "When's the last time you went to church?" I look at this kid, and by kid, I mean 23, 24 years old. And I say, quite frankly, I haven't been to church in years. That's when he goes on to explain to me that he's a youth pastor at a place called Church of Uncertain. Now stop, pause right here. I done heard a whole bunch of church names. The Church of Christ, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, St. Elmo's Church, St. Pius Church. I had never heard of anything called Church of Uncertain. So now I'm standing there thinking to myself, okay, all right, this kid's probably in some kind of cult, and that's why he's giving off this vibe. Now, as I'm shaking his hand to thank him, he says, "Listen, I pulled over on the side of the road because God wanted me to stop and talk to you. And so if you just allow me for a few seconds, let me share something with you." And right there on the side of the road in the middle of the morning, he shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with me and invited me to come to his church. Now, something weird happened when I shook this man's hand. This feeling came over me, this feeling of peace, like no matter what was going on, everything was going to be all right. He hands me this little business card with the church's address and says, "Listen, next time you're coming in this direction, stop by the church on a Sunday morning. I would love to see you there." And then he turns around, gets in his vehicle and leaves. I head on into Shreveport, pull into the casino parking lot, catch a couple of Z's. The next day I go to the poker table, and when I tell you I rack in the money, I go in the door with $250 and leave out with $2,500. $2,500. When I finally head back to the van, I'm laying there catching some sleep. And it dawns on me, I think I'm going to go check out this church, the Church of Uncertain. Now, stop right here and let me say this in the story. What happened to me next had absolutely nothing to do with this church. I'm 100% certain of that. These were phenomenal people, real homely people. Everyone knew each other, kind, sweet, loving. But when I left there, what I encountered, boy, it was the exact opposite. So I head on over to a tire shop, get a new tire, come back to the casino, do some more gambling. I gamble all day Saturday, go back to the van, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and I start heading to this address in a town called Uncertain, Texas. Now, let me say this about these people at this church. First of all, I want to thank them. And I did thank them before I left, because it was during that church service at the Church of Uncertain in Texas that I realized something. I realized that my life wasn't bad off at all. And in fact, I realized that God loved me so much that as a 12-year-old little boy, I learned how to play poker, and I was able to sustain myself from a skill that I learned at 12 years old. But I also learned that day when the pastor was preaching that God wanted more for me. Also, after church, we had a bite to eat, and it was just the most amazing experience. It felt like being at home with family. And that youth pastor who helped me on the side of the road, he was there. And when I tell you this young man was ecstatic to see me, he was absolutely ecstatic to see me. Now, let me say this to you. What happened after leaving that church, I do not attribute it to the church or God or anything else. I really just believe I picked the wrong place to decide to spend the night. Because I head on over to a campground right around Cato Lake, park my van, hang out outside, smoke a few cigarettes, listen to music, relax, chill. I mean, it was an awesome day. One of the most awesome days I had in quite a long time. And then the freaking sun went down. And when I tell you, there's nothing more spooky than the border of Texas and Louisiana. When the sun goes down, man, I tell you, there's nothing more spooky than that. 9 p.m. rolls around. I got everything locked down. I got my seatbelts attached to my door handles so nobody can sneak into the vehicle. I lay it down. I go to sleep, and wham. Now, I'm not sure if you ever heard the sound of sharp nails scratching on glass, but I learned at 1 a.m. that's exactly what I was hearing. This high-pitched screeching sound. And when I open my eyes and move the curtains, I see this paw, not a hand, a giant paw with these long nails just scratching along the window on the back side of my van. Now stop, pause right here, and let me say this. At first, in my mind, this was somebody playing a joke on me. I'm thinking, okay, they got some local kids in the area. Maybe it's some kids from the church, or maybe it's some of their friends. I don't know who it is, but they decide they're going to come out here and they're going to play a joke on me. And it wasn't until the van began to slide, not shake, but slide, that I realized that no, this is not a game. There is something outside of my van strong enough to push this van like it's the Incredible Hulk, and it is sliding my van towards 2 trees. Now, let me say this to you. I'm looking through the window trying to see what's pushing the van, and all I see is fur. Imagine if your German Shepherd or your Collie was big enough to where it put its waist up against the back window of your van, and that fur was pressed up against the glass. That's all I'm seeing. So now I go into panic mode. Mind you, I am in nothing but boxers. I hop up, climb to the front of the van, unbuckle the seatbelt, get into the front seat, crank it up, and start to drive off. As I'm driving off, this thing is pushing the van, forcing me to go in circles. I'm talking about my foot is down on the gas, and it is pushing me, forcing me to spin around in circles. When I look through the side view mirror, is the very first time I get a glimpse at what people call Dogman, and this thing was massive. Gigantic shoulders, big old biceps, huge legs. It has its upper body pressed up against my van like it's doing push-ups. And I'm saying to myself, I am about to die. I'm not sure why I was doing this. Maybe I was panicking, but I decided to blow the horn and just lay my hand on the horn. Burn! If anybody was nearby, they would hear the horn blowing and they would come and help me. Now, as I start to blow the horn, the van stops spinning and starts moving straight forward. But now I'm headed through the trees, headed towards the lake. And so now I have to cut the wheel, dodge trees, spin the van around, dodge more trees, and get back onto the roadway. Heading back to that roadway, I see this thing making a beeline straight for me, running on its hind legs. Let me say this to you. Back in those days, I wasn't the kind of guy who carried guns on him. In fact, I felt there was no need for a gun, but after this encounter and this experience, trust me, I have loads and loads of guns. But I'm driving off, it's making this beeline for me, and it goes into this cluster of trees. And truthfully, I've been thinking about this for years, trying to figure out why did it stop in that cluster of trees? Why didn't it go any further? But it gets into this cluster of trees, and I don't know if it couldn't fit through them or if it didn't want to run over them. I don't know what the reason was. But it gets into that cluster of trees, and it just stops. But me, I don't stop driving. I don't stop driving until I get back on I-20 and start headed back to Shreveport. When I'm on I-20, I pull over, hop in the back of the van, throw my clothes on, drive back to the casino, and park in the damn parking lot. Alright, first of all, I'm gonna admit to you the story that I'm about to tell you, I'm kind of ashamed to even talk about. But I know that talking to you about it may potentially help somebody else. And so, if you will allow me, as a man, just let me get completely and totally naked with you, intellectually and emotionally. And I'm begging you that you don't judge me based on what I'm about to share with you. So, I've been working for Charles Schwab for 12 years at the time. And let me say this, before I get into my encounter and the end results of my encounter, I had no clue about Dogman. I didn't care about Bigfoot. You see, my world that I grew up in was a world of money and power, acquisitions, finance. You know, everything was about the dollar for me. And I'm not saying that to say that I believe that this had anything to do with my encounter or the subsequent things that happened after my encounter. I'm just telling you the truth so you can judge for yourself. Back to what I was saying, I've been with Charles Schwab for 12 years. I get an opportunity to go to a big time private funding firm in Texas. And so I take the job. The second week on the job, there's this hunting retreat. The owner says he has a cabin in the woods in Oklahoma and he wants all the new employees to come. So we head out that way. And when I tell you this guy has a layout, a house on the lake with thousands of acres of land. And when you go inside of this house, it's not set up like a traditional house. When you walk into the front door, it's kind of set up with stadium seating on the first level of the house. You can tell that this property is a business write-off for him, and he uses it for training as opposed to family members staying there. Imagine the scene. You walk through the front doors, this massive open space. It's this movie-style seating that goes up right and left, and then above your head is a screen that drops down and covers the whole entire front door. Now, if you keep walking straight, there's an aisle that leads between the seats. If you go and make a right, there's this hallway with these doors, and each door has a number on it, and it reminded me of a hotel. Now, if you work your way back to the left, you go into the kitchen area, a seating area, a smoking area, and a bar room. When I tell you that this man's property is nice, it's fantabulous. And so for the next couple of days, we're doing these fun team building exercises, paintball in the woods, fishing on the lake, skiing on the lake, all kinds of fun, entertaining stuff. And he's there kind of guiding people through everything and making sure they have understanding. And let me say this, it's clear why this man has the level of wealth that he has. He truly has a deep psychological understanding of people. And he can look at a man, put him in a situation, and see what job best suits him. But right here is where stuff goes off the rails. For me personally, it's 7:30. I'm in the smoking room, smoking a cigar, having a glass of cognac, talking with a few of the other guys. When he walks in, and he singles me out with two other gentlemen, Brent and Clayton. He says, gentlemen, I'd like to talk to you outside for a second. And so we get up and we walk outside. And when I tell you it's fancy, I mean, imagine the most fanciest scenario you could think of. There's laughter in the background, people playing poker. I mean, it's a cheerful, luxurious environment. And we step outside on the porch and he says, gentlemen, there's some things I've noticed about the three of you while we were having our events. And he says, it's something that you're going to have to confront if you plan on being members of this organization. Now, we're all looking at each other trying to figure out what the hell he's talking about. He says, you men are controlled by fear. I've watched you hesitate over and over again to seize on opportunities that were right in front of you. Now stop right here in the story, pause, let me give you some background. Clayton, one of the guys that he singled out, Marine. I mean, real deal, Afghanistan, door clearing, Marine. Now the other gentleman that he singled out, Brent, college athlete, starting cornerback for Texas A&M. And you gotta understand something. For a white boy to be a starting cornerback for a school like Texas A&M, he ain't got no problems with fear. And he's super athletic, super fast, and there's something special about him. So as he's explaining this to us, we're looking at each other trying to figure out what the hell is he talking about. Because I frankly don't hesitate about anything. Now, I'm not a Marine, didn't play college football, but when I tell you I've been in some bad situations in my life, I've been in some pretty bad situations, and I've never hesitated, not once, to take action when it's necessary. And I've closed multi-million-dollar deals, done hostile takeovers, never hesitated. And when I tell you I never hesitated to decapitate a person who came against me or try to stop me from getting my money, I never have, and I never will. So understand, we are all confused. And that's when he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out this key with this yellow poofy tag on it. He says, tonight, you guys are going to travel through my property. I'm going to give you a set of coordinates. You'll travel together and you'll spend the night at this location. And he says, I want you guys to return as soon as the sun comes up. It's very important that you return as soon as the sun comes up. And then he hands us this GPS device with these coordinates to what he's calling a cabin in the woods on his property. Three of us look at each other and start to talk about it. And I'm like, listen, man, I don't know what he's talking about. Do you guys have any clue? And Clayton was the one that said, listen, he singled us out for a higher position than everybody else. And this is a test. Let's just do it and get it over with. Change clothes and we'll meet back here in 10 minutes. So we all go off in different directions, change clothes, come back. I'm dressed to go in the woods. Clayton's dressed to go in the woods. And Brent is dressed like he's going out to dinner. We try and tell him to go change and put something else on. He said, man, I didn't bring clothes to go hunting. I only brought clothes to hang out. So I got to go with what I'm wearing. So now the three of us venture off, circling around the entire lake, getting to the backside and going off into the woods. Now, mind you, it's night outside, it's dark, and the woods are spooky, but spooky doesn't really kick in when you got three people with you. You're fine when it's three men together in the woods, and it's quote-unquote spooky. But the further we walk, the more the atmosphere tended to change. Now, to paint the picture for you, we're talking about pitch black darkness, flashlights, some old Scooby-Doo type of shit that we're on right now. Now, we get to this point where this fog starts to roll in through the woods. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever found yourself in the woods before the fog rolls in. Maybe you've been in the woods while the fog was there. But it's a sight to see for you to be walking through the woods, and then there's clearly a line of fog that comes rolling in. And I'm not even sure if this fog was rolling. It was almost like we were walking into this fog and mist. But the minute we got into that fog and that mist is when things started to change. You started to hear voices, the sounds of trees cracking, all kinds of freaky, weird stuff. And let me say this to you. You don't get to know a man until a man is under pressure. So as we're walking along, Clayton hears the noises, hears the whispering, and he starts praying. Brent starts to freak out a little bit. He's breathing heavy, hyperventilating. And me, I'm just being hyper observant. I'm looking around, trying to see what's going on, sucking in every sound, trying to process the information. We keep going into the fog. And that's when we come across this first marker. And when I say a marker, man, it's lit up in the woods, a pole sticking out of the ground with a white light shining up on it with the same little poofy yellow tag that was on the key. Clayton is the one that says, hey man, we're going to take this just so he'll know that we've been to this point in this location. So we take it, keep moving forward, and then the fog starts to lift. Didn't make any sense at all. It was like there was only fog in that area. Now we're continuing along. It doesn't feel eerie. It doesn't feel creepy. And we come across this little pond, not a lake, but a pond. And on the far side of this pond is another marker and another light. And so now it's starting to make sense. You want us to go on this adventure and collect these markers. The problem is the entire area around that pond is a mire. It's mud. It's thick, wet mud. And so as you step, with every step, you sink deeper and deeper in the mud. And so now we have to backtrack and try and find a way around this muddy area to that marker. It takes us like an hour to work our way around all that mud and then circle back and get to that marker. Now the three of us are standing there wet as hell and working our way to that marker when something comes across that water. You know how in the movies they'll show a ghost going across the water, but there's nothing there, but the water is parting as it's moving? I'm telling you, I watched something come across that water full speed and the water kind of parts open. And then we hear this screaming, screeching sound. Scares the living shit out of me. Clayton starts to pray again and rebuking it in the name of Jesus. And Brent takes off running. Now all hell is breaking loose because Clayton and I are trying to calm Brent down and get him to slow down and stop running away from us. But he's off to the races. I'm talking about this man is running. And this is when things go bad. I mean, really bad. Remember, Brent played college football. We talking about a man who can run. He is gone. And neither one of us can catch up with him. The problem is he's running in the wrong fucking direction. And I can understand you afraid, but bro, you are running super fast through the woods in the night, in the dark, in the wrong direction, leading us deeper into the woods. And so now Clayton and I are trying to chase him down, and he's literally jumping over logs and running like a deer. You can see the light bouncing left and right, back and forth. And he gets so far ahead of us because he's so fast that we're like, man, look, we just gonna have to slow down and track him. Then you hear up ahead where he is, this damn roar, not a growl, or roar. Roar! And the light that he has stops. And you remember those Scooby-Doo cartoons where somebody was holding a flashlight and they'll run and leave the light and the light is flipping up in the air, but they're gone? I swear to you, that's what it looked like happened. It looked like the light was still flipping up in the air, like 9 feet in the air. And all we hear is him screaming and coming back in our direction. So we stand there and wait, and he says, it's chasing me. It's chasing me. It's chasing me. Listen to me when I tell you that this man was fast. Now he's moving through the night in the dark with no flashlight. And you can hear him coming. He's jumping over stuff. Some stuff he's clearly running through because you hear it breaking. And when he gets within our sight, I've never seen terror on a man's face like that. It's clear that he saw something. I mean, he saw something terrifying. He slows down for a second. He says, look, that thing is chasing me. We need to go. Now, mind you, we can't go straight across the water. We got to go around the pond and the muck and then go back through the fog and back out of the woods. So now we're all running and I'm trying to keep pace with him and Clayton. And man, I just can't keep up with these two guys. They are gone. I mean, gone through the woods. And right here in this moment is when I encounter something that changed me forever. As I'm running along, them off in the distance ahead of me, all I can tell you is something tripped me because I'm on a path and I can see enough of the path to know there's nothing in front of me, but I get tripped. It's like I feel like something hits me in my shin. I trip, stumble, roll forward, and then I feel something pulling on my foot, yanking me backwards. When I turn and shine the light in that direction, there's nothing there. I mean, absolutely nothing there. It pulls me for about 10 feet and I start kicking at my other leg and I feel my leg actually physically hit something. And then it lets go and I get up and I take off running again. Now, let me say this about Clayton and Brent. At some point in time, I guess the adrenaline wore down and they realized they left me because as I'm running along alone, I start to see the flashlight coming back in my direction. But by the time they got to me, man, I was so shook up. I mean, I just didn't know what to do. The three of us regroup and start heading back to the main house. When we get back, It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And guess who's sitting outside waiting on us? The boss man. We tell him, we say, listen, we tried to make it to the coordinates, but it's too much freaky and weird stuff going on back there. And Clayton gives him the markers that we collected. He looks at us and smiles and says, you know what? You guys made it further than anybody else. We'll talk over breakfast in the morning. Get this. I head into the room, shower, lay down on the bed, and I just can't sleep, man. Too much adrenaline. Just way too much. The sun comes up. It's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Clayton knocks on my door at 8:30 saying, hey, man, we need to have breakfast with the director. And we head into his area of the house. He had a section of this house, top right section, completely corridored off just for him. We're sitting there eating breakfast. He says, gentlemen, I chose the three of you to be put through this test to see what positions that I would appoint you to. And let me explain this to you. Now, he goes on to tell us that there were cameras in the woods and he was watching the entire thing. And he said the only reason why the three of us are being selected for positions is because no matter what happened, the three of us stuck together. And he needed that inside of his organization. That day, all three of us get promotions. And let me say this to you about men with money and influence. Most people think you got to work hard to make money and get wealthy. No, you just got to be at the right place at the right time with the right person. That day, he made all three of us multimillionaires. But for me, that experience didn't end in Oklahoma. Months later, I'm at home, sleeping in bed, when I feel something pulling on my leg. Now I'm plagued by something. At night, when I'm laying in the bed, I feel it pulling my legs. I mean, literally, lifting my legs, lifting me up. There's been times where I've laid in bed and I felt it rolling me over onto my stomach, pulling my pants down. Now, I don't know if this is because we went into a territory where there was supposed to be cryptids or monsters. I don't know if it was a thing that came across that water. I don't know if it was the things that were laughing and talking in the mist. I don't know what it is. What I do know is that Brent described seeing a werewolf, a black werewolf, chasing after him. It took months before I gathered up the courage to call the director himself, tell him what I was experiencing, and get his advice as to what was going on. And he had no advice to give. He told me that he'd been plagued by the same thing for years, and he didn't know what to do. According to him, it was a part of the power that he had attained and I had attained. It came with it.
So there are days when you just want it all to end. The drama, the bills, the problems on the job. Today I can comfortably say that I was in a very low place. My son's tuition for school was due and I was $1,000 short. No way to come up with the money, and so I went to the school to discuss the issue with them, and they told me I had 7 days, or my son would be kicked out of the school. As a father, we are supposed to carry a lot of weight. It is how God made men. But this day the weight was too heavy and I went to the woods just to get away and pray. I'm there sitting with my back up against a tree, eyes closed, saying, God, I'm not sure why I'm feeling like this is all too much, but I could use a little help here. I'm just listing the things I need help with. I was afraid of failing my family. I was worried that things were falling apart. It was so much on my mind in that moment that I just let it all out and cried. How many of you listening know that men do cry, real men, not crying in public for all to see, whining like a little bitch? I mean, real men go to the secret place and cry out to God for help. When I stood up, things were not better, but I felt better about the situation. Walking back through the woods to my car, my mind was clear, no longer clouded with the fear and doubt. And when I get in the car, I have 3 missed calls on my cell phone. One is my wife, one is my son who was at school, and one was from a number that was just unknown. So I call my wife back first, and she's asking what I wanted for dinner and inquiring about how things went with the school. I'm honest with her and tell her we only have 7 days before they put him out. She sighs in worry and asks, what are we going to do? And I tell her I will figure it out. Then I call my son at school and he tells me he had a fight. Because kids were calling us poor, turns out the teachers were gossiping about how I was always late with tuition, so I head back to school and deal with that situation. Just as I'm leaving the school, the number calls back 0000000, and I answer, agitated, "What the hell is this?" The voice sounded British, like a robot voice, and it says, "You need money and I have something I need. For $10,000, will you retrieve something from the woods for me?" I saw you there today. I'm like, "Listen, whoever you are, I don't have time for bullshit." I assure you, this is not bullshit, Mr. Clemens. This is a real opportunity. There is something that is very dear to me that is within the woods you just left. However, I'm not capable of getting it myself. For $10,000, will you retrieve it for me? Why can't you get it? You have tried. Let's just say that certain parties are at odds with me and they will not allow me into those woods. Now the area he was talking about where I would go to pry is nothing special about it at all. It's just a few miles south of our home on McKee, Kentucky. Hell, it's not too far from the church. So I say, if you are serious, I need $1,000 to pay my son's tuition. Cash app me $1,000 and I will go to the area where you want me to, and if I find what it is, I will bring it to you and you send me the rest of the money. Or not, at least my son's tuition is paid. The voice says you have a deal. I'm digging through my phone to get the Cash App address when I see $1,000 is deposited, and I immediately transfer it to my bank account and say, "Send me the location and what I'm looking for." The voice says, "You are searching for the foundation of a small shed that is in the woods. You will find the concrete slab. What I need is already there in a hole under the concrete. When you get this, I will call you." So we hang up and I call the school and pay the tuition by phone. Well, $980 of the tuition, and tell them I will bring them $20 in a few days. Then I head to this spot, 37-4143-1076-81079, 84.07629369276113. Hell, it was a little bit of trouble getting there, but nothing a man wouldn't do for $10,000. And when I get there is no slab of concrete. There is this chunk of broken concrete, like someone had been there years and years ago. I'm there digging around looking to see if I can find anything of value, and there is nothing, nothing, an old tin box. You could tell someone lived here a long time ago, found an old rusted skillet, so rusted that there were holes in it, and the more I looked around it was just junk spread around in the woods. Then the phone rings, and it's the voice, but the reception is terrible, and I hear it saying, "I need a blank." I'm like, "I can't hear you, what am I looking for?" Then the call drops, so I start to head back to the car where I can get some type of reception, and I'm walking and something runs by me. You know how in those cartoons like the Roadrunner it's a blur, a flash? Well, that happens, and this thing is as big as hell, shoots past me and runs straight uphill. For a moment I thought I was losing it, but I felt the wind from the speed it was moving, so now I'm standing there. I was not afraid. Because it moved so fast I didn't really see it, but I knew something was wrong. But I keep walking and get back to the car. 20 yards away, the phone rings, and it's the voice, and he says, "Did you get it?" I explained that I could not hear what he was saying. "Get what?" He says, "There is an antique metal lockbox there. I need that. It's very valuable to me." Now I saw a tin box, but that could not have been it, so I told him I saw a tin box, and he said, "No, not that trash. This is a green rusted lockbox. It belongs to my great-grandfather. I need it." Just before the voice hangs up, it says, "They know you are there now, so be fast about it." They? So I headed back. At least I knew what I was looking for. And as I'm walking back, at first I thought it was the spots in your eyes. You know, the floaters that when you look in a direction, they dart with your vision. But the closer I got, the clearer. I realized that there was something running back and forth so fast that it was like Superman moving in the woods. Now, I'm at the point where I'm 20 yards away from the stuff and this thing comes running right in front of me. And it was crazy as hell because it speeds up to me. And it was like it slowed down for a fraction of a second to show me its face, turned and looked at me, and you know how online there are those jump scare scenes where it's like a face jumps out at you, then it disappears. Well, that is what it did. I see this snarling face of what looks like a black wolf snarling so fast. It was fucking terrifying. You can't help but be scared. That type of fear runs up and down your spine and into your bones. It makes your legs weak, and that is what happened. They turned to mush, and I felt like I was going to pass out. My legs wobbling, I decided to keep going, and what was crazy was that the fear went away. So now I'm moving back to the area and searching around, and I see what looks like a box sticking out the ground, and so I grab it, didn't care if it was the right box or not. I just took it and got to moving out of there. I'm walking uphill when I hear this howling coming from down below, but it's not in my direction. It's like this thing is howling to the north, and it was then that I felt like, okay, dude, you need to get the hell out of here. I know it does not make sense, but the entire time I felt like it could not hurt me. Like it was just trying to scare me off. But something changed. It was like it was telling on me. I just knew I had to get the hell out of there. So now I'm running as fast as I can to get back to the car and get out of there. Once inside, I'm now speeding on those back roads, and when I get back into town, I'm just sitting there. 1 hour passes, 2 hours pass, no phone call, nothing, so I start to fiddle with the box and try and get it open. But its lock is rusted over. I was digging in the glove box for a knife to pry it open when the phone rings, and it's the voice. "Do you have the box?" "Yes, good." "Bring it to me." He gives me an address on Sand Springs Road, south of Mount Vernon. So I head in that direction. This is where it really gets crazy. As soon as I enter Mount Vernon, the phone rings, and it's him. And he says, "Did they show themselves to you?" I'm like, if by they you mean a freaking monster, yes. What the hell was that? He says it takes a special type of man to be in the woods with them. My great-grandfather was that type of man. I'm not. I tried, and that is how I ended up the way I am today. "Exactly how is that?" I asked. And he says, "You will see. Make a left." It was like he was watching my every move. As I turned down Sand Springs Road, he says, "Come further down and then make a right. The gate will be open." Listen, I turn off the road into the property, and it's not a big house by any means, but it did stand out. As soon as I park, this man comes out the door, walking with a cane, younger man, 45 years old or so. His face looks like it has been through a meat grinder. He is dragging one leg, and he has absolutely no regard for me. He says, "Let me see the box," snatches it out my hand, and walks over to my car, places it on the hood, and starts inspecting it, saying this might just be it. I have been trying for 5 years to get this. The man looked crazy, eyes bugged wide open. He was more scary than what I saw in the woods. I'm like, "Listen, how about we square up on the money? I don't care what's in that box. All I know is there were monsters in those woods, and clearly you tried to get it and they fucked you up bad. So whatever you and them things have going is your business." He is ignoring me as I talk fucking with that box, so much so that I scream. "Hey, where is my money? Have you ever seen a villain in a movie look back over their shoulder with that evil look?" That is how he looked at me, and he says, "You get nothing else until this box is open. If what I need is here, then you get paid. Understand?" The look in his eyes was that of obsession, not possession. Like he had been obsessing over this for years. Now I'm thinking, fuck it, I got the tuition paid, I'm done with this dude, he can keep his money. He pulls out a pocket knife and breaks the rusted hinges off the box and opens it. For a moment I thought he had a heart attack or a stroke because he starts to stammer back like he is falling, and then he screams, "Yes, yes." Finally I have it. By now I'm at the driver's side door of my car, and I'm like, this bitch is crazy. Looking at him, his face all distorted. He looked crazy, like something from The Hills Have Eyes, and I'm like, I'm out as I'm getting in the car. He says, "Stay here. I will give you your money." And he walks back into the house. I sit there for 10 minutes and nothing. Then he walks back outside with a brown paper bag and says, "Here is your money. If you are interested in going back, there is more that I would like to recover." And I'm like, nope, I will pass. He is bent over looking into my driver's side window, and when he smiles, he looks flat out evil. I'm like, "No, sir, thanks. Do you mind if I ask what was in the box?" And he says, "It's none of my business." Snaps. Personality changes, and he is now talking like that British robot, like he has split personalities or some shit. So I pull off, drive home, and tell my wife what happened. You know how it is when you are talking to someone and they think you are bullshitting. My wife has that look on her face until I show her the $9 grand. That night in bed, we start to look up what I saw, and it turns out it fits the description of Dogman to the letter, the speed, the face, the eyes. The shit was crazy. My wife seems to believe that God answered my prayer, but I'm not sure. All I know is we got everything caught up. Car notes, house notes, tuition, everything. That number called me one other time, and he asked if I would go back. Said that 12 people had tried, and I was the only one successful at it. My reply was, hell no, I'm not pushing my luck.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation in life where you were just trying to move past something? Well, that's where I was when I had this encounter. I was trying to move past this relationship, and it was complicated. I mean, this was a love triangle that I never intended to put myself into. You see, a woman who was like a mother to me, her actual son, her blood son, used to be engaged to the woman that I had at that time as a girlfriend. Now, to be clear with you, I had no clue that any of these people knew each other. So imagine the scene when the holiday season rolls around and it's time for Christmas, and I'm excited, man. I'm absolutely over the moon excited. Pretty much my adopted mother to my girlfriend. Listen, I'm having a Christmas party at my house, spent the entire day decorating and getting things together. 50 people are coming over to the house. The party starts off without a hitch. Nothing goes wrong. About 8:45, I get a text message from my mom. And by mom, I do mean adopted mom, like a woman who just took you in like a son, saying that they're on their way. Understand, I get even more excited. A few minutes later, the doorbell rings. I open up the door, and it's her and her son. They come inside. Everything is cool. My girlfriend is off in the kitchen. Initially, everything is cool. I go back to the kitchen to talk to my girlfriend. About 5 minutes later, I notice this look on her face. I'm talking to the men listening to the story right now. Now, you know when something's wrong with your woman. I mean, like, you can look at her physically and tell when something's wrong. She doesn't even have to say a word out of her mouth, but you can look at her eyes, look at her face, look at her body position, and know that something's wrong. That's where I find myself. I'm standing in the kitchen looking at my woman, realizing that there's something wrong. She's staring past me. And so my eyes follow her gaze, and it leads over to Grant. Pause right here, and let me say this. Grant is my adopted mother's son. She's staring at Grant. Grant is staring at her. And it's this look on her face. The look on her face is a look of surprise. The look on his face is this look of anger and disgust. Listen, at this moment in time, I don't know what type of history the two of them had, but in that moment, I know they had some type of history, because he makes a beeline. I'm talking about walking extremely aggressive, bumping into people. Now, I'm seeing this and I'm saying to myself, oh, hold up, little daddy, you're not going to be walking around up in here like you own this place. Sure enough, as soon as he crosses the threshold to the kitchen, he starts to say to my girlfriend, what are you doing here? I thought I told you I didn't want to see you again. Ladies, now pause again. Ladies, you can verify this for me. You see, depending on how a man treated you is how you react to that man. I've never seen fear in my woman's eyes because I never put her in a state of fear. But all of a sudden, I'm watching this fear roll across her face because Grant is talking to her, and I ain't gonna lie to you, as my brain is processing all of this, I'm not liking what I'm seeing because he's talking real aggressive. So I said, hold on, brother. Grant, how you doing? Let me introduce you to my girlfriend. And he looks at me and says, she's your girlfriend? And I said, yes. In fact, she lives in this house with me. Now remember, I described the look of anger and disgust on his face. Well, that starts to triple at this point in time. Now he's really angry and really disgusted. He proceeds to fire off this volley of curse words and insults towards my woman. F you, you, boop, 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 boop. And as these words are leaving his mouth, I'm physically watching her reaction to it, coming to the realization that not only were they in a relationship, but they were in a relationship where he did this regularly. And it brought back to my memory what she told me about her ex. She just said that he was muscular and that he was verbally abusive and borderline physically abusive. Now, I hope you're keeping up with me in the story. And I know that you're saying to yourself, man, what the hell all of this got to do with the Dogman or the Bigfoot? Just hold on a second. I'm telling you about me. And I need you to understand what I was going through. I'm telling you about me. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where time starts to slow down? Well, while all this is happening, everything is slowing down. I'm looking around the room and people are slowly starting to move in a direction, paying attention to this confrontation. And my brain starts to process this situation. Grant's mother is like my adopted mother. But if she raised Grant to behave this way, then that's technically her fault that her son is this type of man. So I'm trying to figure out and understand, I'm trying to rationalize how me fucking up Grant, and listen to me, understand, I'm trying to rationalize how me fucking Grant's ass up is going to affect my relationship with her. And so my brain is going through the process of justifying what I'm about to do. And it didn't take a long time for me to justify it. I just wanted to be justified. And so when I realized that, okay, if she raised him to be this way, then it's her responsibility. Fuck it, I'm finna fuck Grant up. I don't know if you guys ever made skillet corn. It could be fresh corn, it could be corn. Now, I'm not sure if you ever made skillet corn. It could be fresh corn that you cut off the cob, or it could be corn that came out of a can. But you cook it in a black skillet. You put some olive oil, you put some butter, you put some salt and some pepper. Right there on the stove was a skillet with the skillet. And as he takes another step towards my girlfriend, I reach over and grab that skillet and whack the shit out of him, bust him dead smack in his mouth. I know a lot of you listen to these stories and not used to blood and gore and violence, but I will say this to you: when human flesh gets hit with an iron skillet, it loses the fight every time. That boy's face bust open, somebody dropped the watermelon. Blood gushing everywhere, and now I'm losing it, telling him, get your ass about my house, you and your stinking ass mama. That's the only thing I felt bad about with this situation. I didn't have to insult her because she's done a lot for me. Now fast forward. His mouth is gushing blood, his top two front teeth are bent inwards, and he's writhing in pain. People are trying to tend to him, and I'm pulling his ass out of my house. Blood is dripping all over the floor. Throw him out the front door. His mother goes outside. People are calling the police. It's going down around this bad boy. It done went completely ghetto, and it's going down. The ambulance pulls up. Listen, the boy's face just won't stop bleeding. He getting to the point to where he's starting to lose too much blood. They call the ambulance. The ambulance comes out. The police come out. They do the report. Bada bing, bada boom. The party ends. I don't get arrested because this dude's trying to assault my woman inside of my house. Everybody goes away. It's about 1 a.m. and now it's just me and her. And we're sitting on the sofa talking. And she starts to explain to me more about her relationship with him, her relationship with his mom, and how his mom was a good woman, but she did everything she could do for him, but he was just one of those bad apples. Nothing she said or nothing she did would change him. So now my woman's tired. She goes upstairs, goes to bed, but I still have that adrenaline dump going on where you're just shaky and jittery. Not because I was afraid, but that's just how your body reacts when you get into a fight. Well, I go outside of the house to smoke a cigarette. Standing out on the front porch, smoking my cigarette. The Christmas lights are on the house. And now across the street from my house, it's nothing but woods. Talking about pitch black darkness, pure, just wood line. So I'm standing there smoking my cigarette when I see this bright light in the sky. And I'm not talking about like a helicopter light or airplane light. This was just this ball of light, and it was descending from the sky. And the lower it got, the bigger it got. Listen to me, I'm talking about light so bright that it's blinding to the eyes. It comes down low over the trees, and then it just blacks out. Gone. So now I'm standing outside of the house thinking to myself, okay, I just had to whoop this dude's ass. Is this a UFO? What the hell is going on out here? I'm thinking it may have been 13, 14 more minutes that I stayed out there, kind of chilling, relaxing, before I head inside, go upstairs, and prepare to go to bed. Now, once I'm upstairs inside of the house, our bedroom is towards the front of the house, and we have a window that faces the front of the house. That front of the house faces the woods, right? So I'm inside the house when the bright light returns. I mean, just this beam of light, like it's shining straight through the window. I look in the bed, my old lady's asleep, and so I go back downstairs and go outside. Looking up in the sky right now is where I'm going to sound like a freaking lunatic. And I'm fine with sounding like a lunatic. I'm just going to tell you what I saw. So, that bright light is in the sky. It's above the trees. It goes up above the trees and it shrinks down to size. It goes up above the trees and then it shrinks down in size. But then these other balls of white light start to emerge from the trees. And by the trees, I mean from the ground where the trees are. They're going up through the trees and into the air. The closest one to me was probably about 45 yards across the road. And I'm watching this bubble of light rise up into the sky, and there is a giant wolf inside of this bubble. It looks like a giant werewolf inside of this bubble, scratching and clawing at this bubble of light to get away. As I scan right to left, there's 8 more bubbles going into the air. I can't really see what's in them, but they're humanoid in shape and they're massive bubbles. This goes on. These things slowly rise up into the air to that bigger white bubble, and then it all disappears. Woof, just pure darkness. Now, I don't know if that means that cryptids come from UFOs. I don't have no clue what the hell it means. All I'm telling you is this. That's what I saw. And I just wanted somebody to hear about it.
Cause the saints don't mind clapping their hands. They don't mind patting their feet. They don't mind dancing. Hallelujah. I want you to come on in the balcony, down here on the main floor. Put your hands together. Let's praise God for a minute. Come on.
I was born and raised in Mississippi. Southern Black Baptist Church all the way. Man, I remember as a kid, and especially as a teenager, I went to Sunday school. Then I went to church. Then on Monday nights, I went to Bible study. And on Wednesday nights, I went to Bible study. And then Friday nights, we had a retreat at the church every Friday evening. That good, strong upbringing led me to Jackson State University, where I graduated with a degree in political science. And from there, I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and took a job working for the mayor's office. While in Memphis, that's when things in my life started to take a bit of a downturn. And I had my encounter with these black-eyed kids. Initially, things were going pretty well. I was working for one of the deputy mayors, and life was looking good. And although I graduated with a degree in political science, I didn't really understand politics. So when I was living in Memphis, it was my first time actually seeing and understanding how true power works. I did my best to keep with my family's upbringing and traditions. So the first thing I did when I moved to Memphis Was asking around about a good church. I found one called Mount Zion. Started visiting there religiously. So time passes. 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 8 months. And I start to infiltrate the power structure of Memphis. And that's when I realized there was really no duality to it. You see, I found myself trading off my Wednesday night Bible study for Wednesday night socializing. Hanging out, having drinks, talking about politics and what was going on. And that was just the beginning. Then I met Fred. I'll never forget it. The very first conversation I had with this man, his exact words were, "Those who sin together win together." That was exactly how he started his conversation with me and 2 other young men who were at the bar. Fred turned out to be a pretty powerful dude in Memphis. Multiple city contracts. 30% of the sanitation business. Paper supply. Uniforms for the prisons. And even parking meter business. I can honestly say to you that once I met Fred and started hanging out with him, I believe that really started my down spiral. I don't want to make this sound completely and totally negative because there was a lot that I learned from this man. But I had moved away from the spiritual path that was laid before me. Started going down some pretty dark roads. His slogan, "Those who sin together win together," he really lived by it. Although Fred was married, we spent night after night in the strip clubs. And we're not talking about regular strip clubs. We're talking about clubs where the girls were prostitutes. I traveled around with him on the weekends on his private jet with his friends going down to Miami, New Orleans, Vegas. And these guys were wild. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, they had it. And you know the craziest thing was? While hanging out with Fred and his homeboys, my career skyrocketed. I went from working for one of the deputy mayors to actually being a deputy mayor. Talk about rapidly amassing power. In 3 years, I went from a nobody, shuffling paperwork, to one of the most powerful people in the city of Memphis, with direct access to the mayor, the governor, state representatives. Shit, I probably could have got to the president if I wanted to. It was at the peak of my career plateau when I had my black-eyed kid encounter. The mayor was running for re-election, and I had been tasked with organizing a fundraiser for him. So for 2 weeks, I had been working the phone, getting checks in the doors, and setting up all the arrangements for this fundraiser. The night of the event comes, and I'm stressed out, trying to make sure that everything goes well. The caterers are bringing in food through the back door. The flowers are coming in through the front door. There's not enough tablecloths. There's not enough chairs. I'm running around like a madman trying to make sure that everything is on point. And at the same time, I'm pissed off because I hired an event planner named Leslie to make sure everything went smooth. I had walked her out of the back door to give her a piece of my mind. I just wanted to let her know how disappointed I was in her performance. And as she and I exited the back door of the kitchen and stepped out into the alleyway behind the convention center, I realized that this woman already knew what I was about to say. So she cut me off and said, "Listen, I'm sorry about things not being in order. I'm going to fix it. We still got an hour and a half before the event starts and guests start arriving. By the time this event starts, everything will be in order. I promise you. Please, give me 35 minutes. She was begging with me, tears in her eyes. And so I told her, "Till I give you 25 minutes to get it together. And if not, you'll never work in this city again." She turned around and walked back into the door. And I kind of stood there leaning on the wall, searching my pockets for a cigarette. I had just found that cigarette, put it in my mouth, and was pulling my lighter out of my pocket when I heard what sounded like someone kicking a tin can coming down the alley. I look over to my left, and I see these 2 figures. At first, it was just silhouettes. But as they got closer, I realized that it was 2 kids. Now, these 2 boys had to be about 15, 16 years old. They had on black slacks, black shoes, white dress shirts, and a black blazer. They were dressed as if they were literally going to my event. The odd thing was, as they walked, there was this synchronized motion, both of them with their heads down. I light my cigarette, and as they get closer, I'm thinking to myself, 2 16-year-old boys walking up on me in a back alley. Yeah, if they was dressed a little bit differently, I would worry, but I don't think this is anything to worry about. But man, I was totally wrong. I'm puffing my cigarette, and they get within 10 feet of me. And when I tell you these two boys lift their heads up, and I get a glimpse at their eyes, they're black. Not like black contact lenses, but I mean completely black. And then for a second, I stop focusing on their eyes and start to look at their faces. They were identical twins. And I don't mean these were some ugly, unattractive young men. These were two young white boys. Looked like the Jonas Brothers or something, except for they had black eyes. Looking at these two kids was shocking. And I think they enjoyed the fact that they scared me, because they both had a little bit of a smile on their face. That's when one of them says, "Will you let us in?" By now, I'm still trying to take a puff of this cigarette, but my hand is literally shaking. It's sad for me to say this, but I was so afraid that I didn't even say a word. The other one then said, "Will you let us in?" I don't know if my brain was still trying to process what was going on, or if fear had completely paralyzed me. I would like to believe that my brain was stuck in some kind of mud puddle, because these two black-eyed kids were standing in front of me asking about going into my fundraiser event. But once I got over the initial shock of the encounter, I looked at them and said, "Yo, what the fuck is wrong with your eyes? And no, you can't come into my event. Get the fuck out of here." Now that's when shit got even more creepy, because these two little motherfuckers started backing away from me. They didn't turn around and walk away. They backed away in synchronized steps in the fastest kind of fluttering motion I'd ever seen in my life. Almost like something from a fucking ghost movie. I stand there and watch them back all the way up to the end of the alley to where they're out of my sight. And then I turn and go back into the venue. When I walk in the door, the event planner says, "Where have you been? The event has already started. They're looking for you. It's time to go on stage." And I tell her I was just outside smoking a cigarette. She said, "No, you weren't. I opened the door looking for you. You weren't there." And I was like, "No, I was standing right outside the back door smoking a cigarette." "No, you weren't," she insisted. That's when she handed me my index card and said, "You're 10 minutes late. Get your ass on stage. Everything is ready to go." Now, I don't know how this whole black-eyed kid thing works, if they're aliens or demons or ghosts or whatever. But all I know is somehow I lost 35 to 40 minutes of my time. I went on stage, made my introductions, collected my checks, and the event was a smash hit. But later when I got home, I couldn't sleep. All I could see was those freaky little Jonas Brother kids with the black eye. Man, I can't believe that after all these years, I'm finally telling this story. You see, it was in the 1980s. I was a young man, 23 years old, and I was madly in love with this woman named Heather. She and I had been high school sweethearts, but Heather had gone off to college in another state, and I stayed home with my parents. Now, being in a long-distance relationship in the 80s is something that I would never really wish upon my worst enemy, especially in the 1980s. See, back then, there were no cell phones where you can constantly have communication with your partner. All you had was a regular house phone. And then to make that phone call cost money. It was long distance, and I'm not talking about 10 cents a minute. I'm talking about $1.89 per minute for that phone call. So the long distance relationship between Heather and I ended up being very, very rough. She's off to college, meeting new guys, new girls, exploring her life. I'm still back at home in our old town, trying to figure out what I'm going to do with myself. We would talk sporadically here and there, 1-minute conversations, 10-minute conversations, but nothing of any significance. I could literally feel the love of my life slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know what to do. I'll never forget it. It was a Friday night. I got off work early, called Heather to try and settle in and have a good 20-minute conversation. She answers the phone, and I hear all these voices in the background. Male voices, female voices. Now keep in mind, she's staying in an all-girl dormitory, so when I started to hear the men's voices, it kind of freaked me out a bit. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is going to be the end of this relationship. It's probably better if I break it off before she breaks it off. So I tell her, hey, Heather, give me a call when you're alone and we can have a conversation. She calls me back, I would say about 2.5 hours later, right about 8:30, 9 o'clock. It's quiet in the room. And I start to tell her, listen, Heather, I love you more than life itself. But I'm not really feeling comfortable with you being off away at college and me being here. I feel like I'm playing the waiting game while you move on with your life and I'm here all alone. I think we should put an end to this. I think that you need to be free to pursue your dreams and I need to be free to pursue what's best for me. That's when I realized how much of a fucking idiot I was. Heather starts crying on the phone, explaining to me that she's been focused on her studying and no matter how many men have tried to speak with her and talk to her, she wouldn't do anything. She even went to explain that her roommate had a party in the room and that the reason why I heard her answer the phone is because she was on her way out of the door to get some peace and quiet at the library while her friends were partying it up with guys in the room. Oh my God, I felt like a bumbling idiot. I really didn't want to break up with her. I loved her. But my insecurities got the best of me. So I told her that night, babe, I'll be there in the morning. You and I need to sit down and talk. I need you to understand something. The drive from where I lived to where Heather was 6.5 hours. It was already going on 10 o'clock. So I was going to drive through the entire night to go see her. And I know that's foolish and stupid, but that's what you do when you're young and in love. You do stupid shit. So I get up, pack a bag, grab my keys, and head out of the door. And I figured those were people who were sleeping in their cars. Now the area is pretty well lit. And there's this little building. There I can clearly see a Coke machine and a snack machine and 2 signs that say restaurants. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, I just need to take a break off the road. I got to push it for about 2.5 more hours. Let me get out of the car, go take a leak, get a snack, get some sugar in my system, get some more caffeine in my system. I'm going to push on through this ride. I get out of the car and I start walking up towards the building. As I'm getting closer, I start to get this creepy feeling. But there's no reason for me to be creeped out. When I say that it's well lit, I mean it's well lit. It's pretty much bright as daytime out there. But I'm still getting this creepy serial killer watching me type feeling or emotion running over my body. I walk up to the Coke machine and drop my money in. Hit the button and a Coca-Cola falls out. Then I walk over to the snack machine, put my money in, hit the button, my snacks fall out. Now I'm standing there looking at these restrooms. On the left is a women's restroom. On the right is a men's restroom. Brown brick wall, blue doors. Writing is in white. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, if there's any point in time where you're going to feel like some shit's going to happen to you in the middle of the night, it's in one of these rest stop bathrooms. But I really had to take a piss. And as a grown man, there was no reason for me to be afraid. So I take my Coca-Cola and my honey bun and put them up on top of the snack machine, thinking to myself, look, I don't want to walk into this bathroom with something in my hands if I need to defend myself. So I put both my Coca-Cola and my honey bun on top of the snack machine and I enter into the men's restroom. Once I get into the restroom, just as I thought, no one was there. I go to take a leak and I come back out. But when I walk back out and reach for my Coca-Cola and my honey bun, it's not there. Gone. Now, this is not me hallucinating. This is not me imagining that I put my money in the snack machine and I went to go buy this. I literally put my money in the snack machine. So now I'm looking around to see who stole my shit. And there's no one there. Again, this kind of creepy, weird, eerie feeling comes over my body. And I think to myself, hey, you know what? You achieved your goal. You took a piss. Let's just get out of here. So I start digging in my pocket for my keys and walking away. And that's why I hear what sounds like someone's foot sliding across the concrete. I turn and I look to my right. She's got on blue jeans and a black hoodie. How can I tell it's a woman? Because she was curvy and her figure was nice. But I'm getting this odd feeling about this woman. Like everything inside of me is telling me I should run to my car and drive off. I say, ma'am, miss, excuse me, did you take my honey bun and my Coca-Cola? Nothing. Ma'am, excuse me, did you take my honey bun and my Coca-Cola? That's when this lady turns around. And I hadn't noticed everything about this woman because she was standing in this area where kind of the light did this concave motion and left this small space of darkness to where I could see her silhouette and make out that she had on jeans and a shirt, but I couldn't see exactly what her head looked like. But she started to turn her face and enter into the light, and oh my God, there was this older woman. Not like an old hag where her skin was hanging off her face, but she had to be 75, 80 years old. But her body figure didn't fit her face. It was almost like you took a younger woman's body and stuck this 70-year-old head on top of it with this wild black hair with gray roots. And this woman looks at me, and inside of her hand is my Coca-Cola and my honey bun, but her eyes are black. I mean jet black. And she smiled. And at first I thought my eyes were playing a trick on me. She winks, and I realize something about the situation doesn't make sense. There's no way that this is possible. So I turn and start running to my car, hop in, crank it up, and pull off. For the next 3 hours, I was haunted by the vision of what I saw. This woman dressed in all black with black eyes, holding that damn honey bun and Coca-Cola. A few hours later, I arrived at the college campus. Sun was getting ready to come up. I parked, slept in the car, and then had breakfast with Heather. We talked about our relationship and the expectations and setting boundaries and finding ways to communicate better to make sure that no one was insecure. And although getting there was completely and totally traumatic to me, 3 years later, Heather and I got married, went on to have kids, and we've been together ever since.
Life's a coat of many colors. It is never black and white. Can't have one without the other. The dark without the light. In the summer we were lovers. With a flame our hearts would burn. A flame the autumn would smother and leave this heart to yearn. Forever blue, forever blue. I'm putting on a show for the world to see. No one will ever know that without you, I'm forever blue.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the Dark Waters family? It's your boy Dark Waters back, and I got my guidelines. We get ready to get into Mothman. We about to go in. We're gonna do some chitter-chatting about what I find to be one of the most mysterious cryptids out there, because it seems as if Mothman just pops up out of nowhere, and I'm really interested in hearing about the activity that's going on in Chicago. Lon just recently wrote a book on it, and I'm excited to speak with Lon. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Lon has been one of the very early supporters of the Dark Waters channel and the Dark Waters family. I mean, from the very, very beginning, Lon has been around supporting us and posting some of the videos and helping us out. Before I bring Lon in, let me say thank you to my moderators, everybody in the chat. And again, if you are typically have been a moderator and you see that you don't have your wrench right now, you will get your wrench back tomorrow. So don't worry about it. And it's all good. It's all good. With that being said, let's get it started. Lon, how's it going tonight, my friend?
Hey, DW, I'm doing fine, man.
First of all, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you.
No problem.
You know that. And I appreciate your support and your love that you've given me. And guys, just to kind of tell you a bit about how Lon and I hooked up. When I was first getting started and doing my interviews, I was scheduled to do an interview with Lon. And he got all this hate mail calling me a fraud and all the rest of this stuff. And Lon, being the man that he is, reached out and was like, look, I need to talk to this guy. We ended up talking, and that's what you're supposed to do. And we hit it off. And Lon and I have worked on a couple of little things together on monetization of some stories. And he's definitely about to be a part of this major move that I'm in the process of doing. So Lon has been there from the beginning, and he's been very supportive. So Dark Waters family, make sure you support him at Phantoms and Monsters blog. And if you got a little extra money from your paycheck, go on over and buy one of the books. I had an opportunity to get the book and take a look at it and read a little bit of it, and it's a wonderful book. So with that being said, Lon, let's start talking about Mothman. Mothman, my earliest kind of reading about Mothman was about this encounter on the bridge. Remember, there's the bridge encounter where the bridge collapsed after people actually saw Mothman, and he was supposed to be, it's my understanding, he's supposed to be a harbinger of great change or at a disaster, both of those things. Could you start with filling us in on what exactly is the myth behind Mothman, as much as you can, please?
Well, this goes back to the sightings back in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, back in '66 and '67. What happened was, for about a year period before the Silver Bridge collapsed, people had been reporting seeing this winged humanoid that they said looked like a human with moth wings and very bright, large red eyes. And there have been several people who had encounters with this thing, and most of it was taking place at the West Virginia Ordnance Works, which a lot of people dub as the TNT plant. But the younger people would go out there with the drive out there, and they would encounter this thing. So it got to be big news. Eventually, it spread out. Others got involved with the investigation. John Keel, of course, documented it in the Mothman Prophecies. But there's a lot of other stuff going on too. There were UFO activity, Men in Black and such. But anyway, the Silver Bridge, just before Christmas in '67, the bridge collapsed and 46 people lost their lives. So, because this being a small town and such a major disaster in a small area, I actually believe the harbinger of doom tag was put on the Mothman. Basically, people saying that he foretold the bridge collapse, which honestly I don't really buy into. There have been supposed examples of this happening before, though the Blackbird of Chernobyl was one instance where there were some sightings of a winged being above the nuclear plant before the meltdown. But there have been other supposed reports of other disasters and the people seeing these winged humanoids as well. But personally, I really don't put much stock into it.
And I can understand that. But as human beings, you know what we do? We try and find some kind of explanation for what's going on. So at the end of the
Yeah.
day, they probably blamed it on Mothman because it's hard to digest the fact that um, that all those people died. So you got to find some kind of reason, something to blame it on. So Mothman probably.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. And, it was such a small town and, something like that going on. People, you're right, people look for an excuse. And they try to come up with something to explain why that would actually happen. Though, I have talked to several people who had premonitions of that bridge collapse before it actually happened. So, I can only go by what they're telling me, but I think there's something to it.
No, absolutely. I'm pretty sure there is something to it. Now, before we start talking about the actual book, walk us through your process of when you're dealing with an eyewitness. And I think that's important to start there because when people try and discredit eyewitnesses' stories, the process of gathering information from an eyewitness is very important. I want you to lay that out for us, and then we'll go into some of the things that are going on in Chicago. By the way, I personally believe that Mothman is around Chicago because of all the death and violence that goes on in Chicago. But walk us through the process of you dealing with your eyewitnesses and how you gather your information, please.
Well, it depends on it depends on the eyewitness. But overall, I would say somebody writes an email to me, and I respond to them. So I will not in this case with this flap in Chicago, unless I talk to the witness. I wasn't going to put a whole lot of stock into it. So, I'd get the report, check out the location of the report, talk to the team because we got a task force, and if they were able to talk to the person in person, personally, that would be great. But most of the times, it was me calling them up and talking to them. Now, what I would do, and this is one thing that was quite unusual about these particular reports. The witnesses, for the most part, and I'd say 95% of the reports, the witnesses stuck to the original description. And that's kind of unusual. It got to the point where I'd get the report, I'd talk to the individual, the eyewitness, and try to get them to embellish on it to see if they actually saw something, and they wouldn't do it. I'm telling you, and it was really surprising. And in fact, Manuel Navarrete, who was taking reports as well, he commented to me about it. He said, these people won't embellish on their stories. They're sticking to what they're seeing and the original description. And like I said, in these type of, reports, paranormal reports, that's pretty unusual. So, of course, we got a few cranks and some reports I couldn't verify or justify, and I would eventually just take them off. But I do believe the reports that I actually put into the book and what I have on the map now are verifiable. And in fact, I had one of the members of the group go back and verify the sighting with the witness. So they're all verified.
Awesome, amazing. And I know exactly what you're talking about when you say trying to get someone to embellish their story. It's a tried and proven way to kind of get the truth out of a person. Just start adding stuff to their story and see what they do. If they agree with you, if they don't agree with you. So that's awesome. That's amazing. Now, one of the things that when I was on the website and I was looking at Mothman stories, I was reading one about a couple in Chicago that were walking down the street, and Mothman actually flew above them and hovered, flapping his wings. And I think followed them back to their apartment. let's get into some of the encounters that people have had in Chicago. Are you seeing where there's any kind of commonality between the eyewitnesses? Is it a certain race of people, a certain particular geographical area where people are seeing Mothman, or is it just spread across the board?
It's been pretty well. It's been pretty spread out. I mean, we had areas where there were pockets of sightings. In particular, on the river, I mean, on the lakefront area, which is a large area. In Little Village, which that neighborhood has 7 sightings. The Forest Park, Oak Park neighborhood, McCook, which is an industrial area, and some parts of northwest Indiana. Those were the pockets basically. But I tell you, the witnesses themselves ran the gamut of, race, economic status, and such. So there was no commonality, and that's one of the first things we started looking at, if there was a commonality with these eyewitnesses. So no, it was pretty evened out.
No, that's amazing. And you know what? I'm remiss with something because I didn't start with this, and one of the people in the chat room wants you to give a basic description of Mothman. Could you give them a basic description based on all the evidence that you've gathered, and then we'll go into the next question.
Well, the Mothman, that is typical of what people saw in Point Pleasant, isn't typical of what was going on in Chicago. Though one or two of the sightings were somewhat similar, and that would be the Oz Park sighting, where the witness described having the wings like the moth wings and such. But the wings in that particular sighting seemed to be a bit larger than what it was described in West Virginia. There were a lot of sightings with the large red glowing eyes. The way it would propel itself without flapping the wings, just shooting from the ground upwards, and then a lot of times it would screech as it took off. But the descriptions throughout the Chicago sightings went from the Mothman, typical Mothman, then to an owl man, where some of the Hispanic witnesses were calling it La Cusa, which is a legendary winged being from the Rio Grande area. But after the first 3 or 4 sightings, the rest of the sightings were described as having a wing like a bat or a gargoyle. And the size ranged anywhere from 5 to 6 foot in height, the body, which was thin, dark in color, and a wingspan anywhere from 10 to 12 foot.
Man, that's big.
Some had the red eyes, some didn't.
Has anybody kind of delved into what the red eyes are about? Do we have any idea why the eyes are glowing red, what that's about?
That's been a mystery ever since Point Pleasant. I mean, I have no idea why that goes on. Like I said, not all the witnesses saw it. Now, the one interesting aspect to this, and I thought it was interesting, were the witnesses that you referenced on the lakefront, the couple. And when this being descended and hovered in front of them, they said the eyes were, kind of going in and out like, I don't know, not necessarily blinking, but they were going from very light to dimming and back and forth. So that was something that wasn't described in any of the other sightings. I guess maybe because it was in that certain position where it was hovering in front of them. And when I say hovering, I mean this thing had its wings spread out and was like a few feet above the pavement. This particular instance, they said the being had a thin body, but the legs and the feet were evident, but it was vibrating, and they could feel the vibration. And the wings were leathery like a bat, and they could see the light from behind it coming through the bat wing membrane.
When you say vibration, when you say vibrating, they mean vibrating from the wings flapping, or vibrating
no,
as in the
legs,
entity itself?
the legs vibrating. Yeah, the feet and legs were vibrating, which, you know, that was very unusual. And the body itself was black in color, but the woman described it as being like a black shell, or that it was moist because it was shiny in some parts of it. So yeah, that was probably the most accurate, or, you know, the best description we got of this being.
All right, so now let's get into some of the stuff that I know everybody wants to know. Did you have any encounters where somebody tried to shoot at it, or tried to accost the creature, or where it actually attacked anyone, like physically attacked them?
No, and that didn't happen. You know, it was kind of aggressive in a couple instances where it chased down the witness that ran away, and would come down and land in front of it. But there were no real attacks. Now, the last sighting in Piotrowski Park in Little Village, the couple were in a car, and this thing landed on the hood of the car, and the witnesses stated that it was attempting to get at them through the windshield. But you know, I don't know how true that is. I'm just going by what they told us. There was no actual contact with the witnesses, though.
Man, that's scary. I mean, that would be scary. So they're just driving down the street, or they're parked in the side of the car.
They were parked.
Hugging.
Yeah, they were parked.
Yeah. So they had parked. He's trying to get his touchy-feely on with his girl, and this thing lands on the hood. I would freak out, bro. I would completely lose my stuff and freak out over that one. Now, I wanted to ask you something about those neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods, are these like the higher end property neighborhoods, or is this the lower end property neighborhoods? Is this middle class, poverty stricken areas? What about these neighborhoods that these sightings are happening in? What is the
on the lake? The lakefront were kind of high end. They were condominiums for the most part. There were some high end homes in like the Lincoln Park area. Some of the sightings were in South Chicago, where they were just maybe lower income neighborhoods, but there were also middle class neighborhoods as well, upper middle class neighborhoods, Forest Park, Oak Park, Melrose Park. Then industrial neighborhoods where there were a lot of industry, but there were some residents there. And of course there were some suburban areas as well. So I'm telling you, it was nothing that it really distinguishable where it showed up. I mean, it even showed up in Lincoln Park Zoo in one instance. So yeah, it was going everywhere. I mean, it wasn't anything defined.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that question is because I'm trying to logically kind of figure out what it's doing there. You know, like, why are you there? And you're popping up everywhere. You're showing yourself everywhere. How long has this been going on?
Well, there were 3 sightings back in 2011, but before the 2017 sightings, there had been scattered sightings, and some of the earlier sightings go back to the mid 90s. Just scattered sightings, but the first sighting in 2017 was actually in March. Now, the first reported sighting to us was in April. So altogether, we had 53 what we've called verified sightings in 2017, and the last was in October 27th. But it's picked up again, and we had a sighting in early February in Forest Park, Oak Park, And we've had several sightings south of the city, southwest of the city, and we're getting sightings up into Wisconsin now.
You know, that is insane because I'm glad you expounded on that because for one second I was thinking, I'm thinking some Jeepers Creepers type thing where it comes every 10 years and maybe does something. Now, have you guys taken the time to actually investigate and see if there's been an increase in missing persons in the area or if the crime hasn't increased? I'm trying to figure out what kind of effect it has had on the area. Maybe in those specific areas there was increase in crime, increase in missing persons. Have you seen anything like that? Any correlation to that?
We haven't seen any missing pet reports that there was reports of an increase of missing pets. The crime actually has gone down a little bit in Chicago overall since the mid 2016, from what I've been told. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with it,